Hey folks, how's it going? I'm Stardeus and today I will walk you through Stardeus UI. And I will walk you through the Stardeus UI from developer perspective. So I will show you the whole architecture and like how the code works, how UI is rigged, and so on. So let's start with the main menu. When you load the game, this is already UI. There's this press any key button, report a bug button, and the main menu. As you can see, if you click the buttons here, there's some pagination here and there. So for example, there's the load, which has 9 pages, and you can go through and go previous page and go back to the previous menu. So there's some like hierarchy in here, which is flattened out. Yeah, so you can also click some of these items will show you like another panel here with things. Another option would be to just like change this menu when you click it to get to drill inside, and when you click this you get something else. And then there's some like drop downs that also can change things. So how does this all work? In the main menu, Stardeus is using Unity UGUI. Well, actually not just in the main menu, it's everywhere. Unity UGUI. So if you would now switch to full edit mode, and here's our menu. If you would select any object here, like the button, you can see that these are game objects. There's this menu container, menu panel, and it all goes up into canvas, and there's this UI menu root. So the first thing you can notice here is that UI is filmed with a separate camera. If we look at the game view and we turn this camera off, we can see that the menu, the menu is filmed with a separate camera, and the whole UI is filmed this way. So if you load into the game, you're going to get the same thing. Now, this camera has a script called UI activator. Let's try to open that up. So what does this script do? It is basically a bunch of utilities for UI. So for example, there's these things like on UI navigate, so it would do some stuff. No, that's that's a bad explanation. I'm probably not gonna go in depth into every single detail like that, but yeah, it doesn't matter. The reason why there is a UI camera, because we have more cameras. Like for example, next to the UI camera we have the dust camera, which renders that dust, and you can see the dust camera is perspective while UI camera is orthographic. So if we would switch the camera to perspective, it seems to look the same. Interesting. Okay, because it's capturing the UI, so it doesn't probably doesn't matter that it's orthographic. Now, yeah, we also have the starfield camera, which renders the starfield in the background. And in the main menu, also there's the root camera, which is a stack of all the other cameras. I don't think the UI camera is participating in this stack, does it? Yeah, it's not. As you can see, if we disable the root camera, then the picture just stops because it's not rendered anymore. So if we stretch something, yeah, it's just going to be a black screen. But if we re-enable the root camera, then things work. Oh, so UI probably also is in the root camera, because when you resize, we don't get any pictures. So yeah, UI probably won't work. Yeah, UI doesn't work when, although it does work, but we don't see it. Yeah. So there we go. We have several cameras. One of them is rendering the UI, capturing the UI. The others are capturing the background and stuff like that. Now, these little buttons and containers. So there's a main menu script. The main menu script is responsible for building. It's a long one, but it's responsible for building the whole menu. It will add all the buttons, create the submenus, and so on. Now, what is a button? There's this main menu button class, and every single button probably has that class as a mono behavior. Yeah, it does. So this main menu button class is responsible for doing some action. So in the main menu class, we instantiate those buttons and we rig them to do some action when we click. So for example, there's this create button code, which takes an on click, which instantiates a button prefab, sets the position and location, scale and position of this, sets the localized name, sets the name in the hierarchy, so we could know that this button is menu button underscore settings, and so on. And it could have a submenu, so there's this on-click submenu. And then we hide the button because the buttons are displayed when they have to, and so on. So they're just all of them are hidden right here. You can see they're disabled, but they're ready. So when you click around, you can see the different buttons get get enabled. So like when you paginate, you can see that these pages are being enabled and disabled. Yeah, so but this is main menu. The main menu is boring. Like this part here is a little panel. We are using this panel in game as well, and also we use this menu in game. Like when you pause the game, you see this pause menu. And this pause menu can allow you to go to settings, change some parameters, and so on. So now these panels here, like language, video, audio, gameplay, there are classes for these. So there's, for example, settings video panel, which goes through. It has an interface IUI panel, which has very little to it. But then what it does, what is special, it registers itself through this panel's add settings panel. And it creates this new panel descriptor, passes it into add settings panel. And the idea here is that you can add new panels through mods. So you can create a mod which adds a new panel type, and during this register, in runtime initialize on load method, it registers itself with the game, and then the panel could be displayed in a list. The button will be automatically created. When you click that button, it would automatically open the panel, and so on. So yeah, now a little bit I have to mention about this runtime initialize on load method. It's very important in Stardeus. It's used all over the place to self-register components and various classes or implementations or things or anything. So it's used very ubiquitously in the code. It's all over the place. So read about this, figure out how it works. What does it do? Basically, when the game is being instantiated, when you load Unity for the first time, when you start the game, these methods are going to be invoked automatically by Unity, and whatever is in this method would be executed. And this happens for every individual class that is being loaded. So it could be loaded from a mod, it could be loaded for a core game, it doesn't matter to the game, it will still execute this code and it will hook the class in the system in the same way. Either it's a mod or a core, it doesn't matter. Okay, so then all these menus, all these panels, what they're doing, they're just building themselves on start. They are creating various buttons and so on. So I have this UI builder class, which creates things from prefabs. And then, yeah, it's just a convenience builder class, which has some code that produces some things like text-based pro text, slider, input field, and so on and so forth. Buttons. Nothing special here. There's this resource library, which we use to find prefabs. So for example, when you want to instantiate a button, you have to pass the prefab name. Now, I need to talk about this because this part is important. We have this resource library thing, which is a mono behavior, which automatically finds all the prefabs where's the code that does it? Yeah, it does resources load all, game object, prefabs auto load. So let's go to prefabs auto load and take a look. There is this resources prefabs auto load. This is something you cannot do in a mod. So it's a basically core code thing. But for example, UI is the thing we're most interested in. So there's these widgets, and you have all the widgets by name here. Like menu buttons. So if you would double click this, you can see this is the menu button. And you might now, time to talk about styling. You might ask, why the hell this button looks like this and it doesn't look like that? The answer is that this button has a UI style button script, and it has this config ID. So if you open UI style button, there's more. There's UI style button, UI style dropdown, UI style panel, UI style scroll bar, selectable slider, text, and so on. So any button, if we go to hierarchy, actually any UI element, almost any UI element will have this style. So if we look at the menu panel, for example, it will have, no, not this one, but that settings gameplay panel, for example, will have UI style panel class with panel / main menu. So we know that we are loading the panel / main menu. Now, how do we find this config ID? If we open this UI style panel, you can see that it uses this UI style def config. So there's this UI style def find and config ID. Config ID is the thing we get from the game object. So let's take a look at this method and at this class in general, like UI style find, UI style def. So there's this ensure defs static method, which we call when we get. And if defs count is not 0, we return. So then we are loading this mod loader, load objects to also def from config UI. This mod loader load objects is pretty important as well. So it has some explanation here how it works. Like if you're trying to load config Twitch roles, it will try to load it from all these paths here. Like if you have mod foo, config Twitch roles, and have play JSON and leave JSON, it will, like, yeah, if you have all these paths, it will take the, wait, why is this written here twice? Yeah, it should be like this. So it would be, in this situation, if we had the 2 files in the core mod and then 1 file in the foo mod, the play, this one, play JSON, would be from core mod. And since the foo mod describes leave JSON, so leave JSON would be overridden from the foo mod. And this is also pretty important concept in modding, in Stardeus modding in general, that you can override configuration of existing things in mods. But you will have to include everything that the original has and tweak some things. So it's not like extending, it's overwriting. Okay, then this should have been full JSON. Yeah, because it adds a new file. That's the complete example. Yeah, that's the correct example here. Okay, so now since I changed this, it will... I will leave it unsaved so the game would not reload when I get back, because I'm still showing you what this does. All right, so I derailed myself a little bit. So when we load objects with config/UI, what happens here is that it will go into mod path, which is, well, basically, I'm gonna make it easier for you. Just gonna go and it's still reloaded. So let's save. Yeah, so there used to be a config here. We can delete that. Moddable config. Some of this is a bit legacy, but that doesn't matter. Yeah, so this configuration sits in the mods config. Now, where are the mods? What is this, tools? Since it's an empty folder, let's delete that. Time to clean this up. I rarely look at the project, so that's why there's things here that I don't like. So the mods are in streaming assets, mods, core, and there's two mods that are in streaming assets, core and translations. You shouldn't, I'm just saying, you shouldn't put your new mods here. These are the embedded core mods for the game. So if there will be some expansion or something, it will be added here. There's a special directory for placing player mods, and you can get to that directory. Let me quickly show you. To get to that directory, all you need to do is go to mods and then about mods, and then you have open user mods directory, which will open the directory where the mods are supposed to go for the user. And you'll see that this is somewhere in app data local low, and it's near the save file. So if you go up a bit, there's saves and there's mods. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's go to core mod, and then there's this config folder. So this contains all the JSONs, which is the soft architecture of the game. Now, what is the difference between hard architecture and soft architecture? Hard architecture is the code. It's the things that you really cannot override easily. And soft architecture is something like config panel dark. So this is soft architecture because you can change it without recompiling the game. You can drop in new files. You can twist it around and so on. So that's why it's called soft architecture. All right, so let's go into config, and we already looked at the UI, and then there's panel, and then there's this main menu panel. So the one that this thing has. So if we open this file, we can see that it will have a color, which is UI panel main. We define the alpha value of 0.83 for some reason, and then it uses the UI panel's panel background, which is sliced, and this is the automatic image border. So LBRT is left, bottom, right, top, because this is how, so this is the left border, bottom border, right border, and top border. This is how Unity sequences the borders. Now, what these borders are, let me quickly show you. So if you're familiar with a Unity UGUI, let's select the panel first. All right, so this content about mods panel. So there's this image here, and you can see that the image is sliced. So This image, source image, as you can see, it doesn't show anything, but you can see that there's this sprite here, which we load from. And let me prove you that this is in the mods. So this file says this is sprite is UI panels panel BG. So normally in the Unity projects, you would go to resources and look for things in there. But in this game, you go into core mod, you go into graphics and UI panels, and then there's this panel BG. If we open it, it's that exact image that is stretched. And now you can also tell why these borders are 28, 28, 12, 12. So let's open this quickly in it's not Photoshop, but let's open this here. Can we open this with anyway, I will figure this out. Let's open this in Explorer, and now we're gonna drop this on that budget Photoshop that I have. And yeah, so if we look at this again, image border sliced. What does it mean that it's sliced? In Unity, sprites are sliced from edges, so it can be stretched and panned and so on. So 28 on the left means that the slice is made 28 pixels from the left, so somewhere like that. Here is the left slice. Then 28 from the bottom, something like that, from the bottom, 28 pixels. And then we have 12, 12. So the remaining two is 12. 12 from this and 12 from this. So you can see now that this area here is the area that stretches. So when you resize this image, it will stretch it in a way that these corners are untouched. This will stretch like that. This will be untouched. This will stretch like that. This will be untouched. This will stretch like that. And this will be untouched. This will stretch like that. So that's how slicing works in Unity. And here you can clearly see how that's stretched. So this is the bottom left corner. And it's stretched like this is the bottom middle portion, which was stretched sideways. This corner is here and so on. I'm maybe over detailing this, but I don't know. I like to talk, so sorry about that. Just I wanted to go through the whole thing and put this in depth, so maybe like even people who are not familiar with Unity or game development would still be able to understand what's going on behind the scenes. Okay, so I don't want to save this for sure because it would look horrible, but it's not the one we want to close. No, I do not want to save. And let's close these. So this is how the panel image is configured. And then there's this color UI panel main. So colors are also separate. We could put in the hex code here. It would also work. But we also have things like color UI, and this is panel main. So if we open this, we can see this has an ID which matches with that, and we can see what the hex code is. And the alpha is 1, but in the panel, in the main menu panel, we override the alpha to be lower to get some transparency on it. So I hope this makes it more clear how the style appears here, because if you would open, for example, if you would open the original prefab for the panel, let me show you how it looks. Where's that? Resources, auto load UI, widgets, and this is going to be UI panel, I guess. Is it? Now, how do we check what resource, what widget is this? Let's go to panels class and see. There's this container prefab container. So when we show panel, This is where we tried to build the cache. There's the build panel. So we're creating a widget with the container prefab. Now we have to go to panels class and see what is the container prefab. I think panels is in here. Container prefab is UI container. So if we click this, it gets highlighted here. And now we click that. And we can find the panels class here. Panels component. Where's the panels component? Oh, it's not open. I'm sorry. I have to open this. Now, where's the panels component here? I still don't see it. What? UI container. Oh, we already opened it. Okay. Sorry. I'm a bit confused today. So we already opened it. So this is how that panel, this panel here, without the buttons, just the body of the panel, is actually looking like this in the prefab. So you can see there's the close button, which has a different style, and the close button here is gone because we disabled it through code. Some panels will have a close button. So I think in game, like if you load the game, there will be close buttons. Like if you would go open the pause panel here, this close button. So it's that thing, but just styled differently. And that close button is also a thing where it's a prefab. One of the things here. I use nested prefabs a lot for UI. This is a nested prefab. All these icons with this little gradient here are nested prefabs. Okay, now what happens here? So yeah, it has the UI style button with config ID button /icon. So then again, we can go and find button icon. Easiest way is just to use the search button /icon, and we can see this. So here's our ID button icon, and it also has children keys and children IDs. So the button has a panel, a selectable, a text, and overlay. So it matches one by one. The index matches one by one. So panel will be panel colorless icon button. Selectable will be selectable default. This will define the colors and transitions when you hover and so on. Text will define the font size and font color and so on. And active overlay defines what happens when we hover this button. Like this will have an overlay shining around it. Yeah, so that's the general idea of how styling works, and it works exactly like that in game, just like as I showed you here in the main menu. Oh, it's actually, yeah, it's in game already. We're already in game. So yeah, let's switch to the game. We went through the main menu. We saw how we built the thing, how we built the main menu through main menu class with the create buttons. Then we just turn those buttons on and off. Maybe there's just one more thing I would like to get back to in the main menu, so let's go there. This thing here has, like, these buttons here have a container. Now, there is one key thing about this container. It automatically paginates. What does it mean? If you go to load menu, these pages, next, previous, and so on, these are automatically created. And these are also context sensitive. So for example, the screen can now fit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 buttons, because the 12th button would go below that. But if we do something like this, all right, that's a bit cheating because it sticks sticks to the size, but we could stop, set the resolution to say Steam Deck, which is a small screen, 1200 by 800. You can also configure these things here just by adding custom resolutions. I have Full HD, some WXGA thing, QHD, which is a slightly higher resolution display that I used to use. Then we have the 4K UHD, which is a typical 4K resolution. I have the Steam Deck. I also have the ultra wide. This is the display I'm using right now. And there's 8K, which I usually use for super high resolution screenshots only. So I don't really play with this because this is heavy on performance. All right, so you can see here, if we go to load menu, we're going to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11, 10 buttons. It used to be 11 or 12, I think, back there. But we also can go to settings, video, and there's, in the end, there's this widescreen, no, not this, UI scale. So we can disable this, and we can make it like that. When we make it like that, if we go to load menu, you can see that there's now 14 pages. It used to be 9. Yeah, and we can only fit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 buttons. So all this magic that you saw here is actually controlled by a class which is probably invisible here. Yeah, it's invisible here. It's not a game object. But the main menu actually has that. It has the container, which is just a game object with a rect transform, this one. And then you can see that inside this container, we somehow have a lot of stuff. So if we stop the game and look at the main menu, oh, that's also something I want to show. If you just open the scene, so you go to File, Open Scene, and you would open Scenes, main menu, which I have open right now, right? This is what you'll see. A persistent, a menu root, and a profiler debug. So you can see that there's very little here, right? Very little. Now you might wonder why and how the hell when we load the game, it suddenly becomes something very different. So you can now see there's lots of UI things that weren't here before. There's canvas that wasn't here before, and so on and so forth. And the answer is this. I found one annoying problem with Unity. This was in my last game. So when you would take something like full-blown UI and you put it inside a scene, whenever something changes in that UI, the scene becomes modified and you save it accidentally over and over again. So like just changing the resolution or just opening some scene would be enough to automatically, just opening the scene would be enough to automatically touch it, and you would see a star showing up here. And it would say that the scene was modified, do you want to save it? So that was super annoying. And the solution that I found for this is this load prefab script. So I think I wrote it myself. I didn't really get it from anywhere. So that script basically takes this prefab, and when the script awakes, it loads this prefab and destroys itself. So that's how from this UI menu root loader, we have this UI menu root prefab, which contains the whole UI with canvas, with UI rect, menu panel, in-game console, screen block, all these things. So you can see that these are going to be spawned when we load the scene, right? So instead of this, we're going to get the contents of that. So that's how it becomes this thing. Yeah, so this is where it went. It was here in between Starfield camera and audio listener, but since it created a new object and destroyed itself, so a new object jumped over here, and it instantiated all these things here. Okay, so now probably we can go into the prefab, since we know how it works. We can go to UI menu root and scene view. you can see how messy it is, and it even has the pirated copy text in here. Which was the idea that if someone would break the game and it would not update this, it would show this pirated copy. Yeah, if the code that updates this would be removed. And you can see that there's also the demo block, which automatically gets removed when the full build is running and gets to stay here if it's a demo. So the demo and the full build is built from the same code base. You can actually switch it by going to platform and switch. You can switch to demo, you can switch to Steam main production, which I'm using most of the time. There's also GOG, but the GOG is reserved for future. There's also standalone, which means that just a build without any Steam or anything, which I don't usually do unless I want to test something. And then there's the Xbox, which I might do someday, I don't know. I do have a dev kit, but I only tried this like 2 years ago for fun. It actually almost worked. Anyway, back to the UI menu root. What do we have here? So we have this UI camera prefab. The UI camera, as you saw it, basically films the UI. So it's here. There's the in-game console, which you get when you hit the slash button, not slash, the button beneath escape, tilde. And yeah, when we want to run the game, it tries to exit the prefabs to prevent them from being modified. So whenever you're in the prefab mode and you hit play, it will ask you to leave the prefab, which is a smart thing to do. Now, why do I see there's changes? These blue things, I think these mean that these are changed right now. Oh, yeah, these are changed. So these are the changes that do not match to the original. So if we open the original prefab, we can see that this is perspective. And if we, this is the nested prefab root. And then when we click back, we can see that there's this blue thing here, which says that the prefab was modified. So when you look at the inspector, you can see the blue parts which were changed. So the projection was changed to orthographic. And if you click this, you can either revert to original or apply this to the root or just leave it like this. And here is also like in the original, it's probably was something else, maybe 1000. Okay, so what do I want to show? Yeah, let's get back to that pagination. I again derailed myself a bit, sorry about that. Pagination. If we open main menu panel and we go here, main menu panel is this block. As you can see, it's quite tall, but it has this container. And I think to figure out how it works, we must look at the main menu code itself. And what I'm looking for here is a thing called wait a minute. It's probably the UI pagination. Is it? Is it the pagination? So this UI pagination class is pretty small, but it's super powerful and it's used in very many places. It's used throughout the whole game, wherever you see pages flipping through. So in both main menu and in game, like if you go through inventory list, which has multiple pages, it will be this class that is handling the calculation of those pages and creation of the next and previous buttons and figuring out what to show and what to hide. Not the prettiest code, but it works. Now, what did I want to talk about? Well, you know, I think I will skip the technical details of how this thing resizes itself and paginates, but basically it just measures how big the thing has to be to fit in the screen. Then it calculates what's the size of every item. So you could just look at the UI pagination class and figure it out. Now, you may ask, hey, how can I look at the UI pagination class? I don't have the access to the source code. Well, the answer is you can decompile the game or even decompile the demo, which is free to get. You can use some tools. I'll put some links in the description of this video. You can use some tools to decompile the game and to get all the source code. You won't get it identical to what I'm showing you. It will be messed up a bit by the compiler. The comments will be gone. Some things would be compiled away. Some things would be inlined, and it would look probably a bit more verbose and a bit more weird, but in general you can still understand and make sense out of it, and that's how modding is done. So yeah, basically this code is public. That's why it's funny when game developers are trying to protect their code bases and then release a game with C# and not do IL2 CPP compilation, which I didn't do on purpose because I wanted people to be able to decompile the game and write mods. Anyway, I'm derailing myself again. So, any more interesting things about the UI? Okay, I think we're fully covered with the main menu. There's nothing interesting in there, just some Unity UGUI things, and almost everything is dynamic. So the panels are dynamic, the menu itself is dynamic, but some parts are static, and they are just maybe, like for example, this demo panel. We could see how it works. There's this logos. Oh, logos is here. Where's the demo panel? I really don't know how to use Unity. Oh, it's called UI links. Yeah, so some of these things are just classes, regular mono behaviors that are put on regular Unity UGUI objects, but some of these are loaded dynamically through those resource libraries, through instantiation, through UI builder class, which spawns game objects and places them in the right position. And but this is the main menu. Like, let's open the game. Let's open actually the game UI. So first I'll begin by just opening the game itself, and actually let's switch to full HD. No, let's switch to free aspect. Ignore the errors. I'm just working on some new stuff and there's some translations missing, so that's why it's complaining. And the game is rock solid. All right. UI here. So when you click something, you get this panel to show up. You can close it. When you click items in the panel, when you actually hover, some of these will show this pulsating arrow, which means that there is a submenu. If you click that, you're going to get that submenu to show or to hide. You can also hide it by clicking this. And these submenus could be anything, and you can also interact with them in some cases. And some of them will cause pop-ups, and some of them will cause more pop-ups. So I just added a label. Then the menu rebuild itself, so I can change the label, color, size, and so on. But that's just like a demo of what this thing can do, like the power of the menu. Also, there's the radial wheel, which is also made dynamically, which a lot of people hate. Not the fact that it's made dynamically, but the fact that it's a wheel. And there's this hotbar here. You can drag the icons around. You can click Control and click to remove the icons. You can open the radial menu, Control click to add the icons if they're not here. There's also this help, which you can hover to read or click and read about how to use it. Then I'm just like, right now I'm naming what we have, all the UI elements that we have. So then I can go through them and see and show how they're made. But I just want to give you an overview of what we can have in this. So then when we click this, we can get the panel, which is basically the same thing like we saw in the main menu with some adjustments. And these panels are really identical to the main menu ones. And then there's this top right part, which has some stuff that is quite custom, like these speed buttons. This is something that is not moddable. This day clock and timer, this menu button, and these little buttons here, these are called the overlay togglers. So these are the original idea that they toggle various overlays, but then later it's expanded into stuff which is not just overlays. So for example, you can see the list of expeditions when you click this, and you can click to show and hide. You can see the combat status and situation. You can see the event log. And then, yeah, we have also charts. There's the chart widget. So you can show things like electricity, but this save is very boring. So the charts are not going to be exciting for that because it's a demo test thingy. Yeah, so these are called overlays. Now overlays are usually added through game systems, not usually but always. So every overlay will always be added through something from game system. So for example, goal system has this interface called overlay provider. The overlay provider has a list of overlay info, overlays. Overlays have the icon and so on and so forth. They can show a render texture, which is the way how I display that data. When you click, for example, oxygen, how I display. This is a render texture displayed on top of the whole screen, where every pixel represents a cell on the map. Then we have this tooltip, which we can invoke by holding Alt. Also, when you hover anything that has some icon or multiple icons that are cycling, you're going to see a tooltip showing what those icons are about. And the hovered item has this yellow pulse effect around. When you click the item, this becomes green, but you can still hover and they will mix together. This is the work spot being displayed. Well, that's still sort of UI. It's not. It's probably called diagenic UI because it's in game, but I don't know. That doesn't seem to be displayed the way I remember it should. Feels a bit broken. Yeah, I'll have to take a look at this because this doesn't seem to work. This visual effect seems to be broken. Anyway, that doesn't matter. Yeah, so then below this overlay list, we have the event lists. So these are the events. Usually the events have links to objects. When you hover them, there's this line renderer that renders some lines towards the object that does things. And as you can see, there's lots of tooltips. I really love tooltips. Instead of tooltips, I used to show pop-ups a lot, and there's still lots of pop-ups left. Like for example, if you try to, I don't know, go to no, it's now these days it's harder to trigger a pop-up, but they're still there. Yeah, so the pop-ups like this. So this one has like both worlds, the tooltips that I now like and the pop-ups which I now hate. So yeah, that's an example of how. pop-ups used to be. They were all over the place, and they were showing various things. So these days, if you're thinking, should I show a pop-up or a tooltip when I'm hovering something, always go for a tooltip. And that's the right way to do it. That's the Stardeus way now. Okay, now I think what else have I not covered? The context menu. Yeah, when you right-click something, it shows a context menu, which allows you to do some actions. Usually all the actions in the context menu are also in the menu here. So for example, build the copy button is hidden in the fully constructed in the constructible submenu. But if you like right click, this is a common action that usually players like to do. So that's why this action is here in the shortcut. So you can do this and then you can do that. I'm in instant build mode, so that's why it built this thing immediately. All right, so yeah, context menu showed that. What else do we have? Oh, of course, we have some big UI things like the whole research tree, which is now fully unlocked. Let me show you how it looks when you have it locked. Yeah, so these are the icons. Again, you can get the pop-up if you click this, but also a tooltip if you hover. So that's again an indecision on my end. I don't know what's better for the player. Maybe the player wants to open a few things and compare them side by side, so then pop-ups are better. But maybe sometimes you just want to glance and see what's there, so that's why the tooltips are still a thing as well. Yeah, so this here, as you can see, it has also this little panel, which looks very similar to that, and that's because it's the same thing. And wait, star map is not here yet. Let's get back to research. So about the research tree, there's an algorithm which is driven by some Microsoft library, which does the layout automatically for just defining which item depends on what item, and it's automatically grouped, and the coordinates are automatically calculated by that library. So then all is left for us is just to plump down these, and the lines here is just like a shader thing which renders basically a UI rectangle, applies the shader which draws this arrow which slowly moves towards something. So if you would look at the scene view right now and select one of these arrows here, yeah, it's, as you can see, it's just a rect transform with an image, so it's nothing special. It's not really magical, and it's also like rotated, so you can, for example, rotate it on the z-axis to change it. It's not some special super library, it's just Unity UGUI. And the fun fact is that Unity UGUI is so shitty, sorry for the choice of words, that this window here that only shows like, I don't know, 100 boxes is slower to render and like gives you maybe a noticeable frame drop on lower hardware like Steam Deck. You get something like 50 frames per second in this screen, while it's rock solid 60 frames per second in the game. And I'm not talking about this ship, I'm talking about like, let's load something really appropriate. So if we could load this ship with a Steam Deck, and this ship would run at 60 frames per second on a Steam Deck with all the things on it. But when you open the freaking research screen, it tanks to 50 frames per second, thanks to Unity. Thanks, Unity. And the reason is because we have this thing where we move the camera. Yeah, so I'm going to explain why. For that explanation, I'm going to put this side by side. When we move things around, as you can see here, what happens is that this UI camera, let's select the UI camera. Where's the UI camera? Root, UI camera in game. So this UI camera in game is moving around. Is it? No, sorry, the camera is static. The camera is stationary. It doesn't matter if the camera is moving. I tried actually. I did try to move the camera instead of moving the objects. Wait a minute. Actually, no. This could be a solution if we switch to world camera and the tree would stay in the world and not move and the camera would fly around. I think that solves the lag, but to make it work this way, there will be a major rewrite. But, okay, I did some nasty stuff here. Let's get back. Yeah, so the thing is that since we pan around and this thing here moves, every single time it moves just a little pixel, Unity marks the whole canvas as dirty and then redraws everything. And it's not like I'm, you know, super dumb with this and I'm not setting the sub canvas or whatever. No, it's not like that. It's like there's no way to move the UI like this and to not just redraw everything. So that's why if you would look at this with the profiler, you would see that once it's stationary, like once it's not moving, it's slightly better. But when it starts moving around, it's just tanking the frame rate significantly. So I hate this fact, but that's how it works. Right, so it's messed up because we resized a bit. Any other pieces of UI I forgot? Yeah, some of these, for example, some of these events are groupable and it shows like times 14. And then you can click to cycle. So it's just like one single element. It's not UI related. It's grouped in the code, in the game logic, and then just a special UI item which has this little thing with times 14 displayed and something like that. So yeah. What else do we have? Okay, I think it's time to go forward and take a look at how these UI thingies, these UI buttons are implemented. I think for simplicity, I'm just going to load back that small save, that little basic test save, because it's tiny, not distracting as much. So first thing, if we select any entity, let's select something simple, like this heater here. How is this menu showing up? So there's a class called info panel. And if we, well, one way to figure it out, like if you're trying to figure this out, and if you by chance have access to the Unity project, like if you're part of the core team, let's say, or figured out how to get the Unity project, or you're just working on a different game and you want to know how the hell is this working. So you would click the scene view, you would go and find that main menu thing, info panel. But first we have to make sure that it's displayed. Probably a good idea to have these side by side. So canvas, F on the keyboard focuses on the selected object. So for example, you can focus on the tile map, focus on the console, focus on the dust camera, but we want to focus on the camera, canvas, and on the thing called, yeah, so there's a screen block. No, I don't want to talk about the screen block. I want to actually find that panel. Where is it? Screen blockable, sorry. Yeah. So yeah, screen block, that's why I talked about the screen block, because the screen block can show up and it will cover the whole thing if we enable it. And enable the alpha. So this is, yeah, this fades out, so it can cover the whole thing. And these screen blockables are the things that can be covered by this. So for example, as you can see, the clock is not screen blockable because when we go into things like research tree, we still show the clock, so it's above this background which blocks the screen, and so on. So, but that's not the point. The point is that I need to disable. Need to disable that Mac. Yeah, so we're looking for this menu. When we click the item, this menu here. So it has to be inside screen blockable. There's info panel. So this info panel, we can always check if that's the right item by disabling it, disabling the game object. So you can see it was disabled, which means that this, yeah, it's this item. Now there's this info panel class here. So this info panel class, it's a little ugly, a little on the ugly side, but this is the one that happens to display the UI. So first let's just see how it knows what to display. When you select anything in game, when you click on a thing, like we have to probably start with the fact that right now you are in a tool called tool free select. Like if you switch to build mode and select the blueprint, you're in a tool place tile. If you hit the right click, you're back in the tool free select. If you go here in a tool repair tile, I think, right click again, back to tool free select. So if we go and find tool free select, it derives from tool, derives from iTool. So this is the interface for all the tools. And the interesting methods here is on click down, on click up. So when we go here and click down, I'm now holding the mouse button so I can start dragging if I want to, then this rectangle appear. But if I just click up, click down and click up without dragging, we can see that we on click up, we have selected the tile. So we have to go into tool free select and see what happens on click up. So on click up, we are in the end. Yeah, let's say query tiles is the thing we're going for because we're clicking on a tile. So first we tried to see if we're dragging, we're not dragging. We tried to find the being, we didn't find the being, we didn't select the being. We didn't select the object, and when we go to query tiles, in query tiles, we are going to get the position from the coordinates. Now there's one more thing. There are positions called pos, which is integer. We're going to talk about this later, I guess, in a different video. And there's vector coordinates. So every tile has a position, and some tiles that are multiple have more than one positions, but their main position is bottom left always. No matter the rotation, the bottommost, leftmost tile for the multi-tiles is their root. So when we figure this out, we try to select a tile, and then we are putting them into these last selected tiles, and then we're shooting a signal, tiles selected. So this is like a list because we can select, let's say, two things at once, and this info panel will show both of them. We can actually even select like drone, which is a different type of object, and these tiles. We can select basically everything on the map. It will not select floors and walls, just because those are boring, so we could make them selectable as well when we drag, but that would be weird. Maybe if we hold some Control or Alt or something, we could do that. But yeah, and when you select multiple things, there's these multi-actions. I'm going to also talk about them in probably a different video. You can add multiple actions for mass selected items of same type. Now, yeah, so what is this signal? So there's this S, which is this game state. You'll see it all over the place. And sig is the game signal. Let's open the game signal class. So what it does, it basically defines some topics that you can subscribe to. If you're familiar with things like pub sub or like observer pattern, something like that. So you can say, okay, I want to get notified whenever someone calls a method. In that case, tool free select calls tiles selected. So when anyone calls the tile selected method, so basically when we are selecting a tile, we want to get a notification about this. So there's camera focus is listening to that, tutorial is listening to that, tool free select is sending that, and then the debug info text is listening. Info panel is the one we're interested in. And there's also energy, visual effects, and selection visual effects, which are listening to the tiles selected. Now let's go to info panel and see what happens. So you can see that the info panel, let's maybe jump over to that. We are now in the info panel, it's here. So info panel on start, it's a mono behavior, so start will be called. It subscribes to a signal on the state. When tiles are selected, it invokes this method on tiles selected. And then it says require complete rebuild, which just cleans things up, sets the active tiles, which is a local variable, and then it calls activate tiles. So what happens then? Seems like nothing happens, it only plays the sound, which is weird, right? But where it actually starts to come alive is in the update method. This is like the Unity update. And what it does, it has this needs rebuild, and it probably is going to be set to true when we select new items. So then it goes to update panel, it clears it, and then it goes through a bunch of things and basically creates tabs. So right now we are interested only in like entity count 1. So create entity tabs, styles, beings, objects. Basically, if there's just one item selected, and we would try to create these three things, it will only create one of them because the two lists will be empty. So tiles will have one item, but these will be empty, and so on. So it's the same method, as you can see. It will always just create once, and that's how it works. So it takes the dynamic type here, so it will be either tile, being, or object. This is also something in the game that you should be aware of, I guess. There is an entity class. So the entity is anything that can have an ID and can be like an object in the game, like a game object in Unity terms or something. And the entity is an abstract class, and it has three implementations. There's a tile, which is anything that can be built and is stationary, it cannot move. And then there's object, short for OBJ, short for object, which is something like a piece of steel, a pile, or maybe a meal, which can be lying on the floor in an arbitrary position. It can be carried over and it can be consumed. It can be also put into storage maybe sometimes, and so on. And then there's the being, which is basically an AI agent, which has lots of components that can be used to make this thing go alive, and it moves and it does the jobs and so on. So let's get back to info panel after this distraction. So when we create these entity tabs, we are doing this show entity in the end, which does do show entity. And then we are here, this overview list. And this overview list is the class that I was about to talk about. UI data block list view. So this UI data block list view is the thing that handles displaying of these things I call data blocks. So yeah, what it has is a few things here. It's one of those few places in the game where things are not self-registering. So I have this to do, and every single type of the data block, this UDBT class, you're going to stumble upon it frequently when you will be working with the UI of Stardeus. It's short for UI data block type. Since it's very, very frequently used, I shortened it to UDBT. And there's also a class called UDB, which is short for UI data block, which also was UI data block, but I had to type it so many times that I just renamed it to UDB. Okay, so every single type, if we open this UDBT, you can see that there's like just an enum, list of enums. Not list of enums, just an enum with a list of items that we have. And all of these are linked to some entry of the UI widgets. So UI widgets is just a static class with strings which contain the prefab names that are in the resources, auto prefabs, auto load UI widgets. Not just widgets, I think. No, it's widgets. It's an UI widget. So, for example, if you have UI target, it's going to be UI target here, but you can just use search to find it. So if you click that, you can see this is the UI target sprite, and here you press F, and you can see what it is. You can inspect it and see that it's just a rect transform and image and basically nothing else. So just a dummy object that we use somewhere. And you can instantiate that thing if you create a target. Where's the target? Well, it's somewhere here. Yeah, it's somewhere here. Or maybe if it's not even here, maybe it's used somewhere else. But the main ones are the buttons. Yeah, so for example, detail block button is UI detail block button widget. If we go here and search for UI detail block button, we'll find it. There's the long press and the regular one. So if you double click, there's the button. And as you can see, it has this class. It has this component. It has styling. We talked about styling already. So that's why it's looking like this. It's unstyled here. And then you double click this class, and there's the mono behavior that drives this button. So all the buttons are game objects. If you go to the abstract data block widget class, you'll see it's a mono behavior. And yeah, all the button widgets derive from that. And the react on clicks and so on. And the key thing here, the key thing in these widgets is this UDB block. And this is where we separate the data from the visuals. There's the set block method. So on every widget, you can call this method. Actually, you don't have to call it. It does get called automatically by this UI data block list view, which I was talking about. So it creates these widgets and it loads these blocks. There's these methods add block, add blocks, and so on. Build widgets is the main one. So for example, info panel calls build widgets. And then before building the widgets, let's jump back here into update. So we're back in. Okay, let's go back to info panel update. So back in the info panel update, if we need to rebuild things, we will be doing this details list. Or is it overview list? I think overview list is the first one. When we're looking at that, this is the overview, and the details is when we click on the submenu. So there are two lists here. So for example, this is the overview, this is the details, and when you click here, you are getting that. And then you'll figure out you'll see why some naming of the widgets are like that. There's the detail block widget, and because this is some old code from like 3 years ago. Yeah, so this evolved, but I'm pretty happy with the UI. I have to say I'm pretty happy with the UI system. It's complicated, it's a little bit clunky, but it's super flexible, and so far I haven't really stumbled upon anything where I couldn't do it. And with the exception of the research tree, everything is performing pretty well. All right, so back to that method. So what happens when you have that UI data block list view build widgets called? So before you build the widgets, you add them. So there's this data blocks list. And these UDBs, if you open the UDB class, this is short for UI data block, as I said, you can create them. As you can see, there's like 1,000 references to, oh my God, there's so many references. There's tons and tons and tons of references to these. And it can have a bunch of stuff, but it is, technically speaking, it is like a data container that we pass. It doesn't have much logic in it. It mostly has data and setters and getters. And yeah, and update functions to update the data. So what the game does with all these little blocks here, all these little blocks are created by the game components and then returned from entities. Like, for example, when the entity gets selected, the info panel loops through all the components of the entity and asks the component, checks if there's an interface on the component, if the component has a IUI data block provider, data provider interface, this one. If the class has it, and as you can see, there's like tons of things that have it. Over 200 things have it. And they can return an entity, they can return a single UI block. So, and then they're also can return a list of details. So that's where the naming is coming from. There's the overview list, which is this, and this list consists of get UI block results, which returns one block per component. But if you click anything that has a submenu, then this list here arrives from the get UI details, where we pass a list and the component adds the items into that list and then updates it. So it could actually do nothing. If there's nothing to add, it does nothing. The reason why it takes a list as a parameter instead of returning a list is to produce less garbage, because then we create only one list and then we go through all the components, pass that list in, and every component adds something to that list if that's necessary. And previously, long time ago, there was a thing where I would actually return a new list every time get UI details is called, or return a null. But then there was, that was not good, because we had to create lists over and over and over and over and over. And yeah, that was not ideal. So instead I switched this into like passing one list and just filling it up. Okay, and the data provider can get a name. This is mostly for debugging purposes. So now, let's take a look at the actual example. So I hope it's clear by now. Like, okay, I know that this is a bit too much information, but what happens when we select? Yeah, so we shoot the tool-free select, resolves what was selected, and then shoots a signal which info panel object is listening to. And then when that signal gets called, the info panel gets the parameter of what was selected, and it then clears the internal state. It then resets this list, clears this list away, and rebuilds it with the newly selected thing. During the rebuild, it just loops through the entity's components and puts them adds the blocks they return from this getUI block method into the instance of this UI data block list view. And there are actually two of those. So one of those is this initial list. And when you click that, this one is a second. This one is a separate UI data block, a separate UI list view. And if you would open the prefab UI root, which is the game, yeah, you can see this is looking a little messy. It's really hard to tell what's here. Let me try to somehow make it more manageable. Okay, so if we select screen blockable info panel here, in the info panel, submenu marker. Looks like we're, we have the info panel rect, which is this rect transform here, which has 500 width, 1000 height. So what we do is this, so we have this rect. So we draw the panel like that, but when we click the submenu, we are actually creating a new instance where we are offsetting the new submenu items by the width of this right here. So the new items are created like that. And the way the items are created, that class UI data block list view actually uses this pagination thing I talked about in the main menu. Pagination. There it was. So it creates a new instance of that pagination. And the pagination actually figures out where to place every single button. I do not use the vertical or horizontal layout groups. I think nowhere at all, because those are really, really bad for performance. If you may find maybe one or two places where those vertical layout groups are used, but those will be like one-time things and very rare. Yeah, all the dynamic menus in game will be built where you just spawn a prefab and then tell where exactly that prefab has to be. So it's calculated by this UI data block list view plus UI pagination. But the good thing, I'm just talking about these things, but the good thing is that to build UI today with Stardeus, you never ever have to touch anything inside the UI pagination or UI data block list view. So if you would look at this, it will likely show that it's untouched for years. Some of these might be actually touched sooner rather than later. Like I recently added this submenu marker, so it was 3 months ago I touched this. But most of this is untouched for years. 3 years, okay, that was something else, 14 months ago, 2 years ago. Yeah, so lots of this is just old code, which proved that it works and there's no much need to touch it. It really is not problematic. There's not many bugs here and it's just working. Yeah. So now let's just jump into some example component that I have here and show you how a component would create the UI. So you have this UI data provider interface. If you want to show a context menu on the right click, you also have to implement the UI context menu provider interface. And if you wanted to react to multi-select actions when multiple items are selected of the same component, you have to add the UI multi-selectable, but also submenu provider if you want something to be clicked in the game and have a submenu. So if that submenu provider is not defined, and I think the game will not attempt to show a submenu for that item. Yeah, so the idea is this. This code here, actually I'm going to clean this up a bit. get UI block implementation. The very simple get UI block implementation looks like this. So we have this UDB UI data block just for cache here. So we can create it once and keep track of it because it's just data. It's not very heavy on memory or whatever. And then, yeah, so if tile is not constructed and tile is not connected to the grid, we don't return anything, so we don't show the UI. But then if we're constructed and reachable, then we create this UI once. This question equals means that if it's a null, it will create it. If it's not null, it will skip this line. Nothing will happen. It will use the existing object. So we say that we create this UI data block. It wants to get the UI data provider, which is this class. So we always use this here with some rare exceptions where we create a separate class to handle the UI. Then we probably pass another class in here. But mostly from components we always use this. Then we have the UI data block type that we want to show. So iText is just a button with text. Well, not a button, it's icon button with text. So some naming conventions. Yeah, it's short for info text. This means that there's a button that shows details. This is also 2 years ago. It's very obsolete. I'll have to update that. It's not that. But it actually means that, yeah, there is a button on these things. And then there's things with detail, means there's no button. So detail button, it's a lie because button could still be there. But yeah. But let me show you a few examples of how things are different. For example, iText and dtext. You might find this confusing at first. So let's say, and also just to clarify before we go there, let's go to some data blocks, prefabs. Auto load, where's that? Widgets. Yeah, so there's info blocks and there's detail blocks. So all these text, progress, are the info blocks, and all the D are the detail blocks. So the reason for that is legacy, because when we had that screen and we had that first item clicked, this would be the info blocks. And then when we would click one of the info blocks that had a submenu, the detail blocks would show. And the detail blocks would use different things because these wouldn't have buttons. Because these buttons would be basically used for invoking the detail menu, the submenu. So that's why there was like two sets of widgets. One, they are very similar, but some of these are just like with extra buttons, some are without extra buttons. And yeah, let's look at this in game so you'll see the actual difference. Yeah, so that's the answer why we have like something added 2 years ago and stuff, and D something added 2 years ago and stuff. So it's basically, see this commit message there we have seen. Yeah, so let's get in the game and look at this. So these are iText, for example. This is iText. What's the difference between iText and dtext? Let me find the dtext. This is dtext. See? iText, dtext. iText has this clickable, hoverable thing where you can click it and it has an action. And dtext cannot be clicked. It can have a tooltip, but it cannot be clicked. But, for example, this one is a D button. And this one is also a D button. And I button, there's no I button, but I text. Thing is, you can differentiate them if you can hover the icon and it's reacting to hover. It used to be just the icon is clickable. Then I expanded this through the whole item because people were trying to always click the button in the middle and nobody would figure out that you have to click the icon, so I actually changed that. But yeah, that's why these info buttons were with the icons clickable, and the detail buttons never had a clickable icon, but sometimes they might have something like a button here that you would be able to click. So that's the difference. And this one is a progress because it has the slider which is shining. And the shining pattern here is for the colorblind support, so it should be more visible when it's like, yeah, so it will be more visible where it's at. So this is a D slider widget. This is a D text button widget, and so on. So D, as you can see here, you cannot click this part. That's why it's D. And all these with clickable parts are almost always used in this info panel overview list, while all the D are used here. But there's an exception, like for example, this is an I text. Yeah, it's I text because it has this clickable action on top. Yeah. And you know what, I think the video is getting a bit long, so I probably didn't go through it all completely, and I know that still is too much information, I guess, to process, but I hope it makes a bit more clear how UI works and how to make it. And yeah, so I hope this helps. Thank you so much for watching, and I don't know, if this video needs a follow-up, let me know. I will pick up from here and try to explain it further and deeper. If not, there's that, and I hope you can find this information useful in any way. So thank you for watching. This was Spies. The game is called Stardeus. Go get it on Steam and write mods for it. Even the demo supports modding, so you can go ahead and do that. Alright, thanks for watching and see you in the next video. Goodbye. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and consider subscribing to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next video.